Welcome, viewers and listeners, to another edition of CHP Talks. I'm here today with Lisa Miron, a lawyer from Toronto. I'm going to give her a proper introduction in a minute, but Lisa, thank you for joining us today.
Rod, it's an honor and pleasure to be here and to join your viewers and listeners as well.
So Lisa Miron has a BSc in environmental science and with a minor in chemistry. She has an LLB, was called to the bar in 1999, an LLM, Master of Law, and practiced in-house in the auto sector, tech, and she ran a firm, her own firm, for 11 years. She's a mother, a wife, a Christian, and a very proud Canadian. She'll be talking to us today about C40 Cities and the globalist agenda. Many of you are aware of some of what's going on in the world, but Lisa will make us more aware. And she has a Substack, which you should all check out at lawyerlisa.substack.com. So, Lisa, we're going to jump in here. And where do you want to start? There's so much to cover. What would you like to start on?
I want to start on how people usually speak about 15-minute cities and the fact that we are primarily targeted as a conspiracy theory bunch. Right? There's no such thing as a 15-minute city. And so I say that we should have the dialogue necessary to push back. So you don't want to call it a 15-minute city. Well, how about a zero vision city? Because a zero vision city is a city that they want zero automobile fatalities. And in that way, that is the utilization to claw back the car. Or you say, well, what is a C40 city? And we're going to be going through what is that agenda. And so the 15-minute city is a geographical concept. And we're seeing that push through ULEZ in the UK, where through low emission zones, they are targeting you into an area, because to enter a new area, you're going to be facing taxes on a daily basis, right? So is it a 15-minute city, or are there policies that are just connecting and slowly encroaching upon us? Or can they talk about the smart city, the smart city infrastructure fund, and the smart city, which is the idea that we're going to lay all the grid, but we're going to lay all the cables. We're going to connect them to under the roads to all the lights. We're going to dangle cameras to watch you. We're going to make this into a little Chinafication. We're going to, listen to you. We're going to put a smart meter in. We're going to all loop that through. We're going to know who's in the vehicle, where it's parking, right? Is that a smart city? Right? Is that a 15-minute city? So they may say, well, this is a conspiracy theory. It has only to do with the idea that you can walk in a geographical location to get your groceries or such convenience. But in fact, there are policies afoot that are at the global level on a whole host of areas that then drill down to the local level. And they drill down through two organizations I'm going to take you through today, and they end up in your climate plans. And for anybody in any city whatsoever, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can do the same searches I'm going to be taking you through today, Rod. And what's really important is that you have to find out in each municipality who's in charge of your climate plans, because how they are bypassing democracy, I will mention each time I feel that they are bypassing democracy. They end up at the climate plans. Two individuals are in charge. They tell the municipality what bylaws need to pass. They tell the provincial or states, what legislation do I need? They tell the feds, right? What do I need to make this all work? So the climate plans are coming in with teeth and nobody's talking about it. When I say C40, what I want you to think is the shadow government. This is a shadow government in all your cities. And they've been running the government in the dark. We have no clue what they're doing. And so this is an expose for that. So you think the election is about the issues that they tell you it's about, but it's not. It's about what they are putting into real bylaws, real regulations, real teeth that are going to start to affect us in a very drastic way.
Yeah. So what is C40 for our listeners? What does that phrase mean?
Well, I'm going to start with the Global Covenant of Mayors because one leads into the other.
Okay.
They're kind of like sister organizations. And so I'm going to share my screen.
Okay. And for our listeners listening to the audio podcast, I'm afraid you won't be able to see the screen, of course, but you can always come back and watch it on the video if you want to see these. Lisa has quite a bit to share with us by screen sharing, and she'll talk us through it so you'll understand what she's talking about, but it would be helpful for you to actually see the images.
Okay, so for anybody who isn't online watching this, globalcovenantofmayors.org. And then you can go to cities and you can search. And let me minimize this. So you can search any city and find out what badges, what they've been doing. And what you're going to find out is absolutely 12,000 or 13,000 cities have been mapped clear across the world. So are these people, let's see, type your city name. So we could go Edmonton, and we have one result to North America, tells us our population. And what have they done so far? They've mapped out the building emissions. They've mapped out the transportation emissions. They've mapped out industry waste and other. And you're going to see when we get over to C40 why all of that mapping of emissions is important. You are the carbon they want to get rid of. And so, always with the climate alarmism, you have, why we need to do this in Edmonton. Well, as a Canadian, Edmonton likely does not have any drought. They do not have, but yes, they do. According to Rod, according to the Global Covenant of Mayors, it's a medium-high risk of drought, a medium-high risk of extreme hot temperatures. There's a high risk. And I say to you, this is a very, very cold city.
Yeah.
This is a very cold city. And the funniest part is they have a medium high risk of flood and sea level rise.
Yeah.
Well, right? Yeah. The
So if the
oceanfront
oceans
property.
come up an inch or two, Edmonton is going to suffer.
Edmonton's going to suffer, right? Where's my oceanfront property in Edmonton?
Yeah.
So, right. And so they have to do it for these go And so, well, every city, name me a city. Let's go to London, England. You can go to London, England. You can go to New York City. Oh, there's a result. And what are they doing there? I'm not a robot.
It's good to know.
I'm not a robot. I have to. Yeah, they have a result in New York City. Since there are 13,000 cities plotted, they are an organization that weaves all the cities globally. So you think you have a nation state. The goals of the UN, the goals of the WHO, the goals of the WEF are all for a transnational governance. And they're implementing that transnational governance without our mandate. And this is an exact example. All these cities are working together. They all have their initiatives. Invest for Cities, Data for Cities, Innovate for Cities. Like, this is the collection of data on you. They all have goals that you can look into by following what are their resources, what are their impacts, what are their reports. And I blog on a lot of this stuff in my Substack. So, coastal flood for New York is high, and they have extreme high temperatures, extreme precipitation. And they never mention the cold, do they? More people die of cold than of heat. And you'll die of cold that day, right?
Yeah.
Right, that day. You might be able to sustain a few hot days, but you will die of the cold that day, and so will all your infrastructure. Your pipes will burst, and everything else, because this is a drama organization. You're going to get out of this. You're going to get your buses, your EV buses that are 1.2 million a pop. And so I want you to think, is this something that meshes with your democracy, either at the municipal level? Do they disclose what they're doing? Right? Do they disclose that they're beating to a drum that is transnational? That that we did not give them the mandate for it. They took it themselves. So we're not voting for this. So they are. And so then you think, well, what else is going on? So I started looking, and I found C40 cities. And so let me tell you, pardon me, if the Global Covenant of Mayors is the university level, this is the PhD, okay, on the requirements. And you have Vancouver as a C40 city. But what they say with their C40 plans, that is really, really important, is that they expect all cities to follow through in short order, and that infrastructure is being set in place. So all of these mayors are beating to the C40 drum. And you can see it's just absolutely transnational. And
I see you have in Canada, Vancouver and Toronto are already signed on to this.
yeah, in Montreal as well.
Okay. And other major cities around the world, London, Paris.
You can see, sure, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Oslo, Berlin. You can head over here, even Beijing and Seoul, Yokohama. You can go down to Addis Ababa in Africa, Lagos, Accra in Africa, South America, Salvador, Lima, Miami, Mexico City, Guadalajara. I mean, Boston, Washington, Philadelphia, Toronto. Explore. But what isn't here will be on the first one. So you either go c40.org, see if your city's there, or you go to Global Covenant of Mayors and see if your city is there. And again, you can search your city. Edmonton's not there. Let's go Vancouver. We know it's there.
So what is the process that brought Vancouver, for instance? What did they do that put them on this map?
Well, they get approached, and you get a very far left mayor, and then they get brought into this. And of course, it's for your own good, because it's for climate change. And this has been around for a very long time, and they are very accelerated at where they are. So, towards zero waste, green, healthy streets, net zero carbon building. And so what does this all mean, and how can it affect you? I decided to determine, right? And if you are in one of these cities, you need to go to c40.org, and you need to look at, well, what's their clean energy network going to do? What's their private building decarbonation network going to do? What's their zero emission vehicles network going to do? How does this all matter? Connecting Delta Cities network, air quality network, right? That's the low emission zone. That's where you have to drive at 20 kilometers an hour. And you got to remember that everything here is for climate. Everything, right? And climate is important because what? Let's follow this through. It's important because we don't want humans to starve. Oh, okay. We don't want suffering of humans. Oh, okay. So how do they propose to solve for this? Let me tell you,
Mhm.
it's the suffering of humans. It's the starvation of humans. Um, so the report, and I've posted this on social media, and when I do, the link I post goes down.
Oh,
So I have a link up here that you can, I suggest you make your own link as well. And they say it's not a plan. It's not a plan because I call it a very totalitarian plan, a plan in some ways that would frighten people from the past. And it's totalitarian in nature. But if you go right to page 4 or 5, you're going to see they describe this as necessary changes. Okay, so it's necessary. It's not a plan, but it's necessary, and it describes changes. Um, and it's so glossy. Look at all the beautiful effort they put into this, and this is by the University of Leeds, and this is by IRA, and it was made for C40. Okay, this report by C40, Arup, and the University of Leeds assesses the impact of urban consumption on climate breakdown and explores the type and scale of changes needed. Okay, this is needed
mm.
to ensure that C40 cities reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in line with internationally agreed climate safe limits. So they decide at the global scale, right, what the limits are going to be, and they implement it through C40 cities.
When they say
And this,
internationally agreed, of course, they didn't ask me, but they've agreed among themselves to do something with or without our permission.
that's correct. That's correct. And what's troublesome is the slim percentage of CO2 that humans are actually even responsible for, right?
Mhm.
We're such a small percentage of the carbon cycle. Every bacteria and organism and off-gassing from rocks and volcanoes and, plant respiration exceeds so vastly. I think what we're 4% of that 4%, essentially rounding numbers, but we're such a small percentage of the carbon. So even if we did everything,
Yeah.
there's 99 point whatever percent of carbon still out there. That's going to happen through the carbon cycle. So what are we trying to eliminate the carbon cycle life, to save life? It's
Yeah,
just the absurdest argument.
and of course,
And
it's an assumption that we haven't agreed to that carbon and carbon dioxide are bad things. We have, there's quite a jump to conclusions there that we have not signed on to, but they have, and they don't really care what we think about it.
right, and it's shame-based dialogue. So one, you're a denier, right? So you're not in that. We say they own the science, they own 97%. Well, they do own things, don't they? They own the media, they
Mhm.
control the funding, they own the publications that do the funding, and they never publicize the science that actually shows the other side.
Right.
And everybody's been prepped and through this through COVID, and we all know the play. This is what I call in one of my books the transnational trope, right? You can't disagree with it, and it hides an architecture of power, and they own the science. Well, science doesn't work like that, right? Science is challenged, and they don't publish the challenges. And if there is a hell of a lot of good news out there about carbon, shouldn't they tell us? No, they have to keep scaring us because what they're doing is implementing really a dystopian view of the world, and they have the technology, the resources, and the power to do it. So we're at sort of a crossroads. Humanity's at a crossroads. This is not democracy to decide at a level, international level, and then behind our backs at the municipal level to implement. So if anybody was a climate believer, I took environmental science with a minor in chemistry some 20 years ago, and I was hook, line, and sinker. And I was what would you say, a true believer at one point. And climate is changing, but it has to do with a lot of things, and we won't get into this right now, but the orbit of the planet, how much solar we're getting from the sun, and whether or not there's sunspots or solar storms, and all how much that alters the radiation you get. And CO2 itself has been uh, at 10,000 parts per million, and they want us at 400. And at 10,000, we were at colder temperatures. So the correlation between CO2 and temperature isn't even something that everybody agrees at. And in fact, the science that looks at this, that tells us we're in trouble, is modeling science, i.e., it's a computer generated, put in like a video game. We're going to put in our place and we're going to get up with our results. We're going to get our little hockey stick, or this is where it's going. And doom and gloom. And the other part of the science is looking at what happened in the past and plotting the relationship between CO2 and temperatures, and looking at other variables that have nothing to do with human emissions, right? So, the hockey stick is always between 1850 and present, like, that's when the world started. But back to C40. So, the thing that I think your listeners or viewers will be very surprised about is that consumption is how they intend to solve it. So all these big brains came up with communism as the way to solve for climate change. So if it's a real thing, did you know that technology that involves your serfdom is the way to solve for climate change? It was so astonishing to me. All these things that I have been learning in my life as a lawyer, because as a lawyer you really become a very, very good researcher. And some of my cases had to do with power structures and suing the government for various wrongs. And in what you get to know when you do that is there's abuse of power. Abuse of power is just the most natural thing in the world. And this, I found out, was very much no different. So in there, they plot, and remember, we saw on the Global Covenant of Mayors that how important it is for your city to plot, what people are wearing, the emissions from what you're wearing, right? What you're eating. If you're leaving the city, are you? You'll find out about that, right? Your buildings and structures, your automobile, and okay, your IT equipment. They mapped it all. And you'll see they didn't leave anything to chance. And it's so beautiful, right? This is the problem with climate change, is that you are consuming things. You are consuming food. And by the way, we need to act. So, look how much they've plotted this. The estimated people at risk because of, these are the consequences. So, if we don't act, we don't act. We have to do all of this. So I'll ask your viewers to really look through this report and see how glossy it is. If you doubt me that the reason to implement all these changes is to reduce the climate impact of urban consumption. So you're going to be herded into the cities, right? These beautiful cities. And, they're going to start cracking down on the consumption. So the one that should catch your eye, the chapter that should catch your eye, is what can cities do? Okay, so and this is what they're looking at, and they are doing this. Consumption interventions by category. So the targets for consumption climate action. And this is measuring the carbon, and you get your carbon allocation. And, you know, as a result, you're on a kind of new digital leash. And with CBDC, that can really ratchet up how it works, right? So CBDC can work. That's if your viewers probably know, but it's central bank digital currency, can work in a geographical location only. So you got money. You can't spend it anywhere if you leave your 15-minute allotment, I should say. It can measure. It can be programmed not to work on certain things. Sorry, you tweeted about Justin Trudeau in his, 20th year as prime minister. And I'm sorry, you don't get to, buy meat today. So it can work with censorship. It can work on products. It can actually work to expire, right? So you have money, but it only lasts for 10 days. So it can be an impediment to wealth and saving. It's a real control mechanism, and it's slated for later this year. So let's look at these C40 cities, and we've got building infrastructure they want to change, and they say has to go down by 44%. This arbitrary number, right? So that we can get to that arbitrary temperature on Tuesday in 1850. And right? So they know that this 44% is going to get us to that temperature on Tuesday. Everywhere at the same time. I don't know. And your food consumption has to go down by 60%. Okay. So
Gonna get skinny.
you're going to get skinny. Your government's on your fork. That's what I like to say. Government's in my house, dangling from cameras outside. They're on my fork. They're in my car. It has to go down by 39%. Your clothing, okay, and textiles has to go down by 66%. Got too much clothes. And your electronic appliances, they've mapped out, and leaving the city. Your government's decided whether or not you can leave the city. So anybody in any industry whatsoever, this is an absolute war on GDP, right? All the Trudeau policies, the Liberal NDP policies are wars on GDP. And this is why, right? So let's go down. And first, let's look at this building and infrastructure, okay? And they want to change material efficiency, enhance building use, material switching, low carbon cement, and the last one, reducing reuse of building components. Now, when I looked at this, they have the idea of, well, we're going to, hey, get yourself a better furnace, or, get yourself better windows. But at some point it becomes mandatory, right? Not incentives, mandatory. And when you think of Klaus Schwab and he says you're going to own nothing, these retrofits will create stranded assets. And I want you to think about this. So you have a retrofit that is required, and you can't rent that property out to any tenant, and it's so expensive to complete it, right? These mandatory retrofits that they intend to implement. And so if you have a mayor in Toronto, we now have a Strong Mayors Act, which means that someone, her posse in the climate initiative, the two council members in the climate initiative only have to come up with a plan, and she can adopt it, right? So eliminating any kind of democracy. And we have, she's marched in communist parties, and you're on the left coast. So,
yeah, exactly.
You're in a lot of heat already, but they just have to pass a bylaw that is aggressive. And all of what they're doing is in print. And so then you You have a stranded asset. You have to sell it for nothing because anyone who buys it has to put in all those changes. And they're all going to be arbitrary to get to that 1850 temperature on Tuesday. If you do this, right? And that's the you'll own nothing. I've been trying to puzzle through you'll own nothing. And on food, well, food is apparently 13% of emissions in cities. Oh, you're eating. You're eating, right? That's the problem. It's not part of the carbon cycle, no. You know, when the bison eat or the wolves eat, that's no problem. When the bug eats, that's no problem. But you eating is not part of the carbon cycle. It's part of climate change that has to change, right? It's just so absent any actual grounding, but people seem to be enamored with anything that gets repeated enough times that they lose the cognitive ability to challenge and
Right.
push back.
Well,
And this is a shout out to my dad. I had a very strong father, the kind of father you don't usually get from millennium, in this new generation. But he always taught me to think for myself, even if I was the only one in the room who thought that way. Don't trust other people with your decisions and don't trust them to have your back. And he told me at age 5 that, even if I was with an adult in the car, it was up to me to look both ways and to speak up, he said. Speak up if there's a car coming and, the driver doesn't see it. So at a very young age, as a little girl, I was told to think for myself and speak up. And shout out to my dad for that.
yeah, and you by speaking up yourself, you are empowering other people to do the same thing. I often tell our candidates, if you're willing to stand alone, one day you won't have to, because that example, and you are setting an example of standing up against the flow and against this international agreement. And you are encouraging other people to think for themselves. And I thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Rod. I agree. I think that it sometimes feels intimidating and to do so. But it really comes from a place that is honestly wanting to defeat tyranny. So let's do it. Um, but let's look at this. What if they decided for food? Rod, they've decided they have two levels, okay? So this is by 2030. These goals are by 2030. So, 6 short years away. And they're ratcheting. They are ratcheting it up. So the progressive target for food is that each person gets 16 kilograms of meat per year.
Wow.
Oh, okay. So what is that? Like 1.2 kilograms or 2 pounds a month?
Yeah.
Is that about it? 2 pounds of meat a month. Okay. But their ambitious target, if they knock it out of the park, if they really hit that 1850 Tuesday temperature, 0 kilograms of meat per person per year.
They want to do away with meat entirely.
Yeah. So this is transnational in scope. It's plotted all the way around the world. It's being implemented in C40 cities, and it's being backed up in your global covenant of mayor cities. I think the global covenant of mayors, it's a secret agreement of mayors. 0 kilograms of meat per person, right? London, Ontario has the biggest bug cricket factory for our consumption ever. It's really ridiculous. How about dairy? So the progressive target is 90 kilograms of dairy or dairy equivalent. Okay, that's your oat milk, I guess, your soy milk per person per year, 90 kilograms. So just, rough, that's just double it if you're American for pounds. And if they really knock it out of the park, this is 2030, they want you to have 0 kilograms of milk or derivatives or equivalents, your alternatives. Oh, no soy milk, right? No anything.
So then they would actually want to eliminate cows entirely. If you can't eat any beef and you can't drink any milk, why would you have cows, right? So,
I'm sure
uh,
they have it. But
yeah.
and then so what's our zinc consumption going to be like? What's our health going to be like? What's our immune system going to be like? This is their plan. And I call it a plan and I get docked. But this is their necessary changes. And for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to call it a plan. This is their plan to solve for climate change. They want 0 kilograms of meat. They want 0 kilograms of dairy or soy or equivalent per person per year. And guess what? They've decided that to solve for climate change, this is what's going to do it. 2,500 kilocalories per person per day. That they've decided that, not 2,553. No, not 2,000. Whether it's the moderate progressive goal or their ambitious goal, they've decided how many calories you're getting. That's why I say this is totalitarian, right? How did you think they were, even if you were somebody who was on the cusp of believing and didn't want to look at the data on climate change that disproves what, their pixie dust plan, I want you to think that they intend to solve it by being on your fork and measuring your calories with their apps. Okay. And it says 50% reduction in household waste or 0% um, 0% household food waste. Yeah, 0% because you're starving. You're licking your plates, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, you're giving your crumbs. You're letting your kids eat first, if you're allowed kids. Um, and avoid supply chain waste. And people say, well, I'm never going to give up meat. Do you think they'll bring it in? Do you think your carbon apps are going to work on meat? Do you think your CBDC is going to buy meat? Right? Only if you're a brown noser,
Mm.
right? That's
Yep.
why I say this is totalitarian. And it's wake up to all your listeners and viewers, get into your climate plans. And so you say, oh, well, it's climate change past that initiative. Oh, it's climate change past that initiative. Like they think they're virtuous signaling, like they're putting up a new social media picture on their Facebook profile. And, today we're going to stand with Ukraine and tomorrow we're going to do this. And yay, everybody, kumbaya, my lord. No, no, we're passing totalitarianism.
Mm. Wow.
So let's go to clothing. Clothing and textiles, well, it's 4% of emissions. 4%. But wait till you hear their great plan. Not a plan, necessary changes. Progressive target, by 2030, you and your family and everybody you know gets 8 new clothing items per person per year. 8. Okay? That's not whole outfits. That's maybe you get a coat, right? That you slowly cut up into underwear because you need new underwear all the time. The ambitious target in 2030 is 3 new items of clothing per year. So everybody in retail has to know this, right? We have to start beating the drum about what climate plans are. We are in a race to get information out. This is important. This is your C40 city. This is how they've devised it. Great. We're going to get to that temperature on Tuesday in 1850. We are. And remember, ice ages might be worse.
So
So
three pairs of socks in a year. That's it.
three new clothing items. So maybe you pick socks, Rod, but I know I'm going to pick 3 snow suits and break them down into separate clothing myself. Like,
Wow.
right? You get 3 new clothing items per year. So everything's threadbare. It's serfdom. It's Monty Python. And you know, bring out your dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, um, as an
But
aside,
we will be posting this, a link to this document. We'll put in the show notes so that people can go over these in detail themselves.
oh yeah, if it weren't so beautifully done. Yes, this not plan, necessary changes document is slick,
Hmm.
right? It's slick. So your private transport, everybody thinks the battle is between EV and ICE. And I've been in the auto sector. So let me tell you what they want. So the progressive target for 2030. And you know, you've got Gibo there who just put in everybody has to have EVs, right? By 2035. And by 2026, it's 20% adoption. And by 2030, it's 40% adoption, but they don't have the mining capacity, right? They don't have the manufacturing capacity. None of it all adds up. The grid can't support it, right? Can't support. And then, we're adding so much other electrification on the grid. So it's this, we're mandating an industry to die. So progressive target in 2030 is 190 vehicles per 1,000 people. Well, maybe everybody else is on buses. But their ambitious target by 2030 is that zero private vehicles. Nobody has a car.
By
Nobody.
2030.
By
2030.
2030, nobody has a car. And remember, they're implementing this. So right now in ULA's, yeah, a woman, I just watched a video. It is so expensive for her to drive in there, right? So expensive that she can't now feed her family. She had something like $400 before uh for food for her family for the month, and now you know this new taxing on vehicles has made it that she has no food. So consumptive interventions that they say, oh well, I'm never going to get rid of my car. Well, maybe the gas stations get pulled out. I've heard about situations now in rural areas where the gas stations are now so far and few between that farmers are driving forever to fuel up, right? So consumptive interventions, people say, well, I'll just make the decision that I'm going to keep my EV or sorry, my ICE car. I'm going to make that decision. Well, not if they have CBDC and not if they have these cameras and not if they have these people implementing these tyrannical laws. We have to get in there. We're at the 11th hour. It really is the 11th hour. And this is so funny, right? There's always so many idiotic things in this not plan. Optimum lifetime of your vehicle. Okay. A progressive target by 2030 is a 20-year lifetime for shell interior. So let's go 2030. By 2030, you have to have a 20-year-old car. Your car had to be built in 2010. But the ambitious target is where we've become Cuba. We have a 50-year lifetime for body of vehicles by 2030. You see what I mean? That they don't really intend to manufacture the EVs necessary for us.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
How do you have a 50-year-old EV? That's the 50, right? And it's also idiotic. The car has to last 50 years. And we're all our own mechanics, are printing up your manuals and jiggering around. Are there going to be any mechanics? Right? All the industries that are just going to disappear, right? The people who clean cars, people who make cars, the people who repair cars, it's all gone. And just in case you thought, well, I'm going to get out of here. They've decided getting out of here. How are you getting out?
Yeah.
How are you getting out? In your personal EV or your personal vehicle that you don't have anymore? And let's go back to that clothing for just 1 second. It's 4% of total emissions, but you only get 3 items of clothing. So you go down to My son, I have two sons and they're both athletic and I can't keep their knees in their jogging pants, right? Like, what are we doing? So aviation is 2% of total emissions in C40 cities. So your cities have decided you leaving the city is part of their agenda, right? Your government is on your fork. It's in your house, right? It's changing everything. It's in your closet. You're getting dressed with your government now. So they need to reduce the number of flights. Okay. Does the, tourism industry know this? Your tourism is your like block. Progressive target in 2030, one short haul return flight every 2 years. So a short haul flight, you can't go very far, has to be less than 1,500 kilometers. And in the UK, they're already eliminating short haul flights. So it's
Really?
like this, yes. So it's like this. They're writing it down. Sorry, you're at the airport. I want to go. Well, can I go in a long haul? No, your C40 city says you can't go in a long haul. You can only go in a short haul. Do you have a short haul? You know, short haul. Sorry, we don't have short hauls anymore. They've been eliminated. It's it's tyranny. It's tyranny in print, and it's so glossy and it's so pretty. And your ambitious target in 2030 is that you only get to leave once every 3 years. So your mayor, Olivia Chow, has decided you're not leaving. It's up to her, right? She's a C40 city, right? And 100% sustainable aviation fuel. Maybe you don't want to go up in these airplanes anyways, right? By 2030, it's all batteries. I don't know. What's sustainable aviation fuel? If ethanol is
Yeah.
sustainable for planes, is it good? Is it sustainable for the rest of us? For my ice car?
I don't think they've found the sustainable alternative yet. So they're wishful thinking there.
Wishful thinking, or the planes are just not who's gonna get in them? Um, no. It's very sad. Your electronics and household appliances are decided 3% of emissions. They've decided progressive and ambitious target is the same. Um, you get, laptops or phones or similar devices updated every 7 years. They've decided that gets us to the 1850 Tuesday temperature, right? Not 7.5, not 6, not 4 years. You got to do that. That's what has to happen. And then chapter 7 is the I'm laughing at you guys chapter because after implementing what is a gulag, you tell me, I can't leave my city. I don't have a vehicle, right? I have a diet controlled by my government. I have a clothing allowance by my government. So there's no industry, there's no self-sustaining industry, right? Like what's the retail sector looking like? Right? What's the restaurant sector looking like? Right? What's the transportation sector looking like? So they say there's no 15-minute cities. So then they say, okay, look at the amount of money we're going to save doing this. This is the laughing at us. We're going to reduce deaths per year, 170,000 deaths per year. Oh, great. Because we're eating less or no meat and we're eating more vegetables. Great. Great. Right? We never get out of the pen. We never get out of our playpen where they decide everything for us. Look, we're going to save billions of fresh water per year. We're going to save billions of land. We're going to save 25 billion. Tell me if Justin Trudeau cares about spending money or not.
No.
Tell me, right?
Mhm.
Just inflate it. Now think about consumptive interactions, right? Already we're experiencing the consumptive intervention. Right now, the cost of living is almost the cost of living for most people, right? The cost of living is because of inflation, because of their absurd spending, the inflation and the interest rates and the, 1-2 punch that makes is that this is the cost of living. So already, well, I have less to spend on in the economy. I can't go out as much. I don't have, pro piano lessons for my children anymore. I can't afford, this or new things or travel. Consumptive interventions have already begun. So you can stop people from consuming by making life so expensive. Then you're going to stop people from consuming through regulations, right? This not plan says they're going to use financial means and regulations. So what's that? Mandatory new windows or no windows, whatever absurd thing they're going to do, right? So you can't afford to keep that place. You're going to be more and more dependent. You're going to have no customers because you're not allowed to have customers when you have no spending money. There's no spending money left in our economy the way the Liberals are running it. So they're running it alongside this plan. And that's partly the consumptive interventions. Clothing and textile. Look, we're going to save 93 billion in clothing and textiles. Who cares? I'm cold. Who cares? My daughters haven't had new underwear for 3 years. Like, who cares? And does that include shoes? Do my shoes have to last? Every year I get a new pair of shoes and 2 other items? Or because it's winter boots?
Mm-hmm.
It's very sad the way they go through this. And so I say we are at the 11th hour and we have to make people aware of what C40 is, what the 15-minute city is, what the zero vision city is, how they work together, what the smart city is. And let me go to my blog if it's up here. So if you look up the Smart City Infrastructure Fund, whether it's in the US, North America, or in the EU, it's all the same. They'll give you money to put up infrastructure that makes everything look like China, and which is all made in China, essentially, on a grid that the CCP can probably watch. Let's think about that, because you've got on the left coast lots of interference in election issues. So if you can see here, they lay the fiber optics, right? And they're 4G or 5G or next G. Your fiber optics works with smart metering. So they know, oh, how much water you're getting, how much electricity you're getting. Do we have oil and gas anymore? Do we have furnaces? They work with the cameras on streetlights. They work with the Wi-Fi. Now there's cameras now. If you look up, there's cameras on all of your streetlights. Go everywhere. Small towns. They went into small towns as small as Espanola, Ontario. They've put up this infrastructure. The pitch always is to the council members or public works. You'll know when a garbage is full. Really, I needed that. I need this kind of infrastructure, right? I can't just have a schedule to pick up garbage. I can't. I have to know. Well, what else do they know? It all goes back to an office. Let's call that the CCP or whoever's behind all of this Smart City Infrastructure Fund. And it's apparently to help with continued urbanization, climate change, and resource scarcity. See how it's all tied together? Development of sustainable communities. That means the 2,500 calories per day communities. The no meat communities, the here's your clothing allowance. Sorry, it doesn't fit. Oh, well, technological advancement and digitalization. So, my argument is all this digitalization is going to take a hell of a lot of our grid. All this watching us, telling us whether or not we can have water or energy based on our, posts online. Energy and resource efficiency. And, I can give you this. Let's go to the EU version. There's the EU. They call it SCIF, Smart City Infrastructure Fund, and how much money you can get as a city to do all of these investments. And they're making that money easy to get, and they're pitching it, and your climate happy council members are taking that city debt and going in debt to basically watch us. So, this is happening. It's happening everywhere. And you can look at the Global Covenant of Mayors to research it yourself.org or C40.org. And, this is a WEF post from last year, November 6th, 2022. And I'm going to try to play it here.
And we're developing through technology an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on. We're developing.
So I hope your viewers heard that, but he basically said we're developing a carbon footprint tracker to track where you're going, what are you consuming, etc. on the platform. So the intent is that all of this works together. All of this works with digitization. The plan that they say is not a plan also works with what they say are going to be regulations, which we have federal governments all implementing regulations that are, anti-farm, anti-nation state, pro-censorship, in pro-control, and spending money on global initiatives that don't benefit locals, and creating massive debt that creates inflation. They say it's going to work with, so regulation, they say it's going to work with your financial means. So CBDC can instantly tax you. So, you go into that low emission zone and you're going 40 kilometers instead of 20 kilometers an hour, and you get instantly taxed. And you try to buy a burger and you get instantly taxed, and it eats too much of your budget up. So financial means is a very threatening one, because we are moving to CBDC in so many ways. There's CBDC trackers, and we could probably just have a talk on that. But that's usually where I conclude. In some of my talks on the smart city, I go into specific cities and expose how their climate plans are actually working. But for the time frame that we've been allotted, this gives a big overview on how to research. And I think one of the best ways to get people on board is to go through the plan, not plan, and to look at these two sites and to realize every single person lives in a community that is an ecological economic web. And so they're going to see all their neighbors suffering, the restaurants, the pro-family play places, every single item that you can think of is in that industry, whether it's textile or what have you. The only growth industry is likely going to be building the infrastructure necessary to pen everybody in.
Yeah. Well, that is quite a startling array of things that are coming against us. It gives a pretty good context for what's going on with the farmers' protests in Europe right now, because if it isn't just a matter of trying to reduce the amount of fuel that they're using or whatever, it is a part of the project of eliminating basically any livestock farming in the world. That's where, according to this plan, that's where it seems like we're going. And Canadian farmers are facing it in different ways, but the carbon tax is certainly one of the crippling factors in this country. It's totally unnecessary. It's totally being used to control and to offset the wild spending of this current government, which is just throwing away taxpayer dollars hand over fist. So it's a very sobering look at what's coming through world government officials, people that we don't elect in little cities in Canada, but that are having impact on the decisions made in the little cities in Canada. So, Lisa Miron, thank you very much for bringing us through this, and we will all have to go do some research on our own and visit the C40 Cities, the future of consumption in a 1.5 degrees world. We will definitely encourage our viewers and listeners to have a look at that document themselves and take time to absorb some of this information.
It was a pleasure to take you through this. I know it's tough, but why are we being shown these documents and why are we alive at difficult times? It's because we're being called to do something about it.
Right.
And we aren't given this knowledge to sit on it and worry about it. You know, I have a friend and she's a Christian Arab, and she said to me, Lisa, in the Bible, there's 365 ways that the Lord says, do not fear or have hope.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're given this information to act on it. So let's do that.
Yeah. Excellent. So your Substack, lawyerlisa.substack. Is it com or I don't have that in front of me.
I think it's .com, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Visit Lawyer Lisa at Substack, and you can follow. She puts out a tremendous amount of information every day. You can get on her email list, and you will get a lot of stories coming on different aspects of what's going on in the world. And it's very good to be aware. We can't have our eyes closed and just be drifting on into the future, because we're going to find a future that we don't like unless we stand up and speak up, show up, speak up, stand up, and try to arrest the slide into this tyrannical anarchy that we see,
absolutely
burgeoning around us. So again, Lisa Miron, fantastic. Thank you for doing this in the midst of your busyness as a mother. You're educating the Canadian public. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Okay.
Yeah, God bless you.
God bless.